Hey Tom, it's Mike. Delicio? Yeah. So I'm struggling a little bit. I know you wanted me to come up with a intro for your rapid fire roundup videos, but I'm just kind of lost for some inspiration. Do you have any ideas that might help me out?
Yeah, rapid fire makes me think of fast things, like an amusement park. Listen. Find a video of the scariest, most intense, dangerous ride you can think of. Do that.
Got it.
Hey everybody, I'm Tom Vasel. Welcome to the Dice Tower. And today I'm going to do a roundup of 6 different games that I have played and give you my thoughts and comments on each of them. So, well, I don't have much more of an intro than that, so let's get started. Our first game here is Sayu. This is an abstract strategies type game with these really beautiful pieces here. So these are wooden octagon pieces, and you can see they're red on one side, blue on the other side, with various arrows on each of them. And you're going to be placing this tile here in the middle of the table, and then you're going to put these tiles next to it in a grid that extends out from that. And when you have an arrow pointing at something, it will flip to the other color. So flipping colors of tiles, and by the way, you're pulling them from this bag here. Flipping tiles of their colors, something that people have done before in Mancala and games like that. A couple problems with this game. I like that, I mean, it's from Thailand, and you have a good wooden game. It probably is from Thailand. But the rules of the game are on the back of the box, which means there's not a lot of room for nuance. I'm like, well, exactly how does this work? Whatever. So they have, a little example here. You can flip when you point an arrow at something else, but if there's an arrow pointing back at you, you can't flip. And if the big arrow on here has to point a certain way, that's fine. But again, I don't think this cuts it well enough. And I'm not 100% sure that we played it exactly correctly. We went by the rules as is. It's a very simple game. It feels a little random because, you're going to put these arrows out. You don't want to spend a year trying to figure out where to put each of the tiles. And you're also kind of in a small little grid here. But once all the tiles are placed, the game's over, and whoever has most of theirs wins. Pretty simple game, but not one that I'm going to come back to very often. I thought it was an interesting concept, but as a game, I was kind of meh on it. This one's a 5 out of 10 for me. The next game we're taking a look at here is Varda. Now, this is a game from Iran and won a contest here. First prize at the Land of the Beautiful Mind. And so this is a strategy game. Here it says it uses the process of planting flowers and producing golab, the Persian rose water. This is a worker placement game where you have workers of different colors. You have pink, green, and blue workers that you're going to be placing out on a board. You're getting land, planting flowers in that land, moving on a technological track, extracting this essence here for points. So there's a lot of good in this game. It's definitely a game that is not a simple game. I mean, this is the rule book here. Quite a few rules involved here. One of the things this game has is you have these different color workers, and they go to different spots. And at the end of a round, all the workers that have been used will be put in a pile, and players are pulling them back. And so there's this weird concept of people are taking workers so that they can place them in certain spots on the board, but you might take colors of workers that later on you're like, I wanted to take that action, but I took blue workers and I should have taken green. And I found that sounded cool in theory, but in actual practice, it was like, well, you'll take the best workers first. And at the beginning of the game, we're all trying to plant land and flowers. At the end of the game, we're harvesting them. So the colors that you needed shifted, and there was never any real struggle as to which one am I going to take. It's a neat concept. I just think that maybe that could have been cut from the game completely, and you just have the same workers every round. It definitely is a tight game. There's a bit of luck involved in it. The technological track is very cool, and I like the theme. I mean, there's not many Iranian games that I play, and so this is an interesting idea. But overall, the game itself is fine. I think the rule books, even with the advanced rules, are a little too much for how little actions and things you have. The payoff and the different things involved just doesn't really come out into this game. And if it wasn't for the theme and the country this comes from, I would have said this is a very forgettable game. I think that part's interesting, though. But at the same time, I don't know how often I would want to play it. There's interesting ideas into it, but it's kind of, it falls a little flat and the game drags on a little longer than it probably should. But as it is, I would give this one a 6 out of 10. Now, I don't use the words cash grab that often when I review games because, yes, every company is trying to make money from games. But Indiana Jones Throw Me the Idol definitely feels like a blatant cash grab, from the very uninspiring artwork to the fact that the game comes with, ooh, an idol and a bag, ooh, neat, and a spear and a spider. And the way this game works is each player has their own, and it's a 2-player game or a 2-team game. You get multiple players per team. Has a bunch of cards that look like this, and you say go. You start putting these cards out and building a pattern on the board till you get to this middle section. Where the pattern is, about 2 feet. How close do these cards have to be? Who cares? It's a speed game. So the first person to get there gets a coin, which is a random number of points. Then you turn over a challenge game, which could be anything from throwing the spear through this whip, or dropping this on the floor and having it land on a target, being blindfolded and doing stuff. They're all very uninspired games. I really, really don't like games like this when it feels like the effort put into these games is like, what if we throw the spider at the wall and see who gets closest? That's not effort. And the components and the box is a bad quality box. The rules are okay. This is from Funko, and I like a lot of their stuff, but this is not included in the things I like. I was very unimpressed with this. I found the whole thing to be uninspiring. The idea of flipping cards and putting them next to each other is interesting, but you do it 3 times over each game, and it gets very samey, and then you kind of say, well, it doesn't matter who won that. Now it's time to play a game, and we're going to do some weird, funky party game. And it just feels like these were made up one night with a bunch of people sitting around a table going, here's your stuff that you have, make a game about it. Nah, not for me. This one is a 3 out of 10. Here we have another game from Thailand called Cabbage Farm. Now, Cabbage Farm, after I'm playing this several times, I'm realizing is most definitely a kid's game, and I think it works in that regard. In Cabbage Farm, you have a board with a bunch of cabbages randomly put on it, and on your turn, you have several workers, and you'll place these workers on different action cards. Now, the action card mechanism in this game, I feel, is a little weird. There are 5 different cards. There's always one card out there. Somewhat you move 3, somewhat you move 2 and draw an action card, 1, draw 2 action cards, things like that. But they change from round to round, except there are 7 cards and then you shuffle them up and you just put out 4 plus the one that's already out there. And it just feels like there's some weird rounds that way. Why are all the cards not different? Why not just have all the actions available? For a kid's game, it feels like a weird and messy mechanism thrown in. But you put your worker out. If someone's worker is already there, you got to pay a coin. Coins are points at the end of the game, so you got to keep an eye on that. And then you just run around and pick up cabbages. But there's also a chicken and a sheep that you can move around and steal other people's cabbages or steal their coins. So there's definitely a little bit of take that style stuff in the game. And then you have little orders that you need to fill. I need a red, white, and blue cabbage, and I get 9 points. A yellow and a green cabbage gives me 5. Adults, swing this one far away. I'm giving it a 6 out of 10 with the recommendation for kids only and younger kids. And then even then, you have to be warned that there's a bit of the, kind of like I said, a take that element to the game. Like, haha, I got you. I chased the chicken after you. We moved this over here. And there's almost an illusion of choice. But it could be a stepping stone up to something else. And I do like the theme of running around and getting cabbages. And it does teach kids, like I said, you need to get these 3 colors to fulfill this order. But it just seems like there's a couple mechanisms that they put in the game where they're like, hey, let's switch out the action cards each round. Hey, when the cabbages are removed from the board, we're going to put them in the middle and everyone's going to pick where they go in turn order. Those things slog the game a little bit more than they should. So it keeps me from being more delighted with this game than I normally would. But that's Cabbage Farm. right now we're taking a look at the Great Race 2, but I haven't seen the first one. Well, neither have I. This is the sequel to the Great Race, which I have not played. I know Z played it here, but from what I understand, this was a standalone game. Z did not care for the first one, so I was like, all right, well, I will try the second one because I tend to like racing games. But you know, when I like a racing game, there's one thing that will make me sure to dislike it, and that is when the race is slow. And unfortunately, the Great Race 2 has that as one of its myriad problems. First of all, we have the rules. There's a lot of different rules in here, but the rules aren't that fantastic. You do have this really cool dial that you'll have for each of the racers, an engine gauge, a chassis gauge, a petrol gauge, and then you have skills and funding, and there's some interesting things that you're going to do on that. And then the actual race happens, and you slowly trundle across the board, placing tiles. You try to place good tiles near you and bad tiles near other people, but then the other people are just going to come and drive down the path that you went down. And so you're all kind of driving down the same path. You're stopping in town so you don't run out of gas. And that's the game. There are special abilities which don't feel particularly balanced. There is resource cards which also don't feel balanced. There's definitely ones that are better than other ones. And there's an FAQ on the back which does not cover all the questions we had in the game. But the biggest problem that we have with this Great Race game is that it's slow. As you go across Asia or the US, and by the way, I very much dislike a mechanism in this game where you are pulling resources from a bag and then the side of it depends on which map you are, which is not quite so obvious. But anyhow, but you just go and you move at this glacial pace across the board. Now, that might make sense in a movie setting where there's crazy stories happening and pie fights and cake fights and smashing of gas stations and, you know, hijinks all over the place. But in this game, it feels like, I mean, especially look how big, and you can't feel this, but this is a very hefty box. And there's just too many rules, too many things for something that essentially is, I move a couple spaces, I put out some tiles, oh, I'm running out of gas, I'll stop in this town. And when one person gets ahead in this game, it's also kind of hard to stop them, to bring them back without resorting to just putting bad tiles in front of them, which then means they have to go a different way, which then means you have to go a different way. So, I don't know. I don't feel any need to go back and play the first game in this one. But the second one, I was not very impressed with this at all. This is a 4 out of 10, The Great Race 2. I was very excited about the next game here, 11. Now, I am kind of a sports neutral person. I don't think sports are bad. There are some sports that I like a lot, like baseball. And I also think soccer is a pretty good sport, or football. Oh, look at this. Hello. I think it's what they made the box for, so you could do stuff like this and take pictures. But anyhow, but what's really fascinating to me about over than just sports, and by the way, sports does not make a great game. If you asked me to do my top 10 soccer games, I would be very hard-pressed to do so. Because football is a very fast-paced sport. As you're kicking the ball around and everything, it's hard to put that into a board game. But this, you're the manager of the game. And I like that aspect, so I was pretty pumped about this one. And honestly, there's a lot going on. So this is a fairly involved game. As you go through the rule book, there is which is a pretty hefty rule book here with a lot of different rules. You are basically getting some people. First, you have a board that you put in front of you, and then you're hiring staff, and you're building up parts of your stadium, and you're hiring players and firing players and training players, and you do all this, and then you play a game. And then you see who wins or loses that game, and you go back to the next round, and you go through, and you're going to get points for how well your team does over the season. That, theme-wise, is absolutely fantastic, and I'm a big fan of that. But there's several problems with it. First of all, the board. I really dislike this. It seems so neat an idea for me. You have these 3 different board members in front of you, and each of these board members is going to vote a different way on an issue, and then you roll a die, and so if I roll a 1 and 2 of my board members have yellow on 1, but one of them has red, then yellow is the issue they vote for. Well, first of all, that sounds cool, But then I thought about, like, I don't really have any agency here. My agency was picking these guys at the beginning. Secondly, you turn over these event cards each round, and these guys vote on it, and it just feels like some random event thing that happens. In this very strategic game, each round starts off with sometimes some really random thing that happens. And yes, there are ways to re-roll the die, but it still just feels random luck. I didn't like that. Then the next part of the game I really enjoy, as I'm hiring trainers and building a stadium, and you get these 3 different discs, and there is definitely confusion that what do green discs do, what do red discs do, because they're resources. Yellow discs, they're money, and that's easy to remember because yellow is gold. But the other 3, green, red, and blue, it's not easy to remember what they do, and they can be used in different spots in different places. And I found that to be confusing, but the rest of it, hiring people, taking actions, having extra actions on your staff, that's all neat. Then we get to the game itself. And in the game, you're going to be flipping over a card so you set up your players on your team, and you'll have basically a bunch of generic players, but as the game goes by, you'll get a few veteran players and stuff, and then you need to be able to afford to field them. But you get your team out, you put them in positions, and by the way, very poor rules talking about how to do all this. Then you flip over the card, and you see how the enemy does, and then you go through this very boring process of comparing each section of the field of the enemy team with your team and seeing who scored goals. And it is mind-numbingly boring. It feels random as all get out, because you're like, oh, this team's going to do a lot of shooting or something. You're like, oh, okay. Oh, you meant from the right side. I put my defenders on the left. You're just guessing. And the game is so boring and unfun, it ruins it. I have played 11 multiple times, and each time I'm going through that first round, I remember, and I'm like, I forgot, this part is very interesting. Then we get to the game, and it's deflating every time. I almost wish the game wasn't there. I know that you need the game, or else all the other stuff you do doesn't matter, but I wish there was a way they could have even more reduced the game, because it really brings the game down. I have to give 11 a 5 out of 10. Because I don't like it. I wanted to enjoy all these different things, managing your staff members, yes, and expand your stadium infrastructure, unleash the potential of your players. I'm great. They have a series of expansions for this. There's a lot of cool ideas in it, but it's got to be fun at some point. And it reminds me a lot. So there have been a TV show, Studio 99 or whatever it was called, about these people putting on a comedy show, and it was a very interesting show until they showed the comedy skits, and you're like, but the skits themselves aren't very funny. That's how this is. It's like, it's all about playing soccer. Focus on that part, but when it comes to the actual playing soccer, I would have left that to a different game. So anyway, that's 11. And that's it, folks. I'm Tom Vasel, and that's my roundup for this week. Until next time, you've been watching the Dice Tower.